So my presentation today is work I've been doing together with a PhD student at Wollongong University, Kerry Wilkinson. And it's a very particular case study that kind of puts Bob's privilege and social injustices into a context that gives you an example of how this plays out in everyday life. So we draw on encounters with humour as an embodied and effective everyday practice by female firefighters in New South Wales to negotiate adversity within the continuous male stronghold of firefighting. Humour, laughter and unlaughter function both as a coping mechanism and as a form of resistance in everyday negotiations of gendered norms, patrilineal structures, gender relations and gender identities at home, at work and on the fire line. And we draw on interviews that were conducted in 2011 and 2013 with both men and women. Our study builds on these questions. What can humour do to unsettle privilege and invert established hierarchies? How might it overturn the taken for granted and challenge those who seek refuge purely in the rational? And Dodds and Kirby pose these thought-provoking questions to demonstrate how laughter and unlaughter are socially powerful. The paradoxical nature of humour enables laughter and unlaughter to play a formative role in the learning and teaching processes that impose social discipline. So cultural studies and understandings of humour build on three key philosophical theories: laughter as power or domination, the shock or surprise element of humour, and the psychological and relationship dis-enabling effects. And the scrutiny of these three theories have received for centuries help identify three, I think I might have skipped one. No? There we go. Three particular social and disciplinary functions of humour. Humour is both universal. Sorry, I have lost my... There we go. So humour is both universal and particular in that all societies display humour, but not all people find the same things funny. Humour is social and antisocial in that it can both forge social bonds and exclude via mockery. And humour is simultaneously mysterious and understandable. So in this way, beyond revealing cultural processes, humour has a subversive potential in that it can weaken the dominant ideology by meticulously representing its absurdities and in so doing exposing them to ridicule. And it points to three particular important humour effects which influence how women negotiate the gendered terrain of firefighting, how humour can act as sites of resistance, it can provide refuge, and it can exclude by creating boundaries. And I'll give you examples of each of these three types of use of humour. And I'll start with humorous exclusion. So there's a fine line between latent and blatant discrimination in many of the stories told during interviews. In contrast to the outright discrimination experienced and wry explanatory laughter used by this female firefighter, it's the habituated and unconscious practices of many male colleagues, often in the guise of practical jokes, which continuously remind women how their gender is a source of discrimination. The participants' wry laughter in this case reflects both the disbelief in male crew members ignoring their leader as a display of ageism and sexism, with potentially dangerous safety implications, and the resilience gained by 2 decades of subsequent leadership experience, which signifies professional stamina. Humour plays a central role in how men and women variously perform, react to, and cope with acts of exclusion and inclusion. In this quote, a female firefighter draws on wry humour as a tool to process the frustration felt towards unequal working conditions created and maintained by men in the head office who excluded women by deprioritising the need to provide uniforms that fit female firefighters. So female firefighters told of sharing private jokes with each other about men to foster solidarity in their ongoing struggles to address this important occupational health and safety issue. So here they're joking about how if they could create uniforms that accommodate pregnant women, it would also accommodate men with potbellies. So the safety implications of having to fight fires in ill-fitting uniforms, what one participant calls the size of a small tent, are self-evident. Uniform types also impact on female firefighters' overall sense of workplace well-being. Not having an appropriate uniform can lead to other forms of exclusion and just joking types of harassment by men when women go about everyday practices such as urinating while out on the fire line. So in this quote, she says, "When I first started firefighting, we had uniforms, overalls, and I don't know how many times the helicopter circled me doing a pee in the bush because it was funny, you know. You'd learn not to look up. You'd leave your helmet on and you'd look down because then they didn't know who it was other than it was a girl." The agency addressed that. They actually went, "We need to give them pants," and then when the uniforms came out, they said women as a priority get pants because they had to stage it over a few years. So it's ironic that while changing workplace culture may be frustratingly slow and seemingly a constant work in progress, participants also identified conscientious long-term efforts at an institutional level to unsettle a patriarchal workplace by a range of measures. And this includes the gradual introduction of female uniform sizes and other efforts such as banning alienating male practices like pornographic magazines in fire trucks and new calendars of warehouse and office walls. Part of what humour and laughter accomplish is the surfacing and exposure of inconsistencies, paradoxes, ambiguities and contradictions. It thus provides a useful analytical lens for understanding how the challenges many women face when striving to gain recognition for their firefighting competency can be a result of subliminal behaviour by men who in theory support equal opportunities in the workplace but have never questioned the way their own behaviour reproduces inequalities and sexism. The use of humour to draw boundaries of exclusion, such as men having a laugh at the expense of women as a consequence of impractical uniforms, highlights the ways that male discipline and practice in traditional male-dominated environments, such as firefighting, can continue to manifest in discriminatory behaviour even when institutional structures change. It shows how everyday behavioural norms can essentialise particular traits, such as joking culture, as being central to male identity without questioning the hostility and damaging effects this may have on women, and how women create humorous space of exclusion as a coping mechanism. So moving on to humour as resistance and refusal. During interviews, we encountered narratives of the use of humour and teasing by male firefighters as a way of othering female colleagues to confer outsider status. In a particularly demeaning case, male firefighters drew on the symbolic power of the firefighting uniform and sexually explicit imagery to belittle and provoke a female colleague. So I'll talk you through this one. She's saying, as a female ranger, and she's saying, "I was one of 4 professional women in the service at that time. I was coming down to help them do planning, and they had this big, those big posters of women, big breasty women in a little bikini with a fireman's hat on, holding a hose. They had put a big sign over it saying, 'Welcome to our new planning officer.' They were standing on either side of this photo going, giggling at me like 2 little schoolboys. I looked at them and I thought, I either acknowledge this and I say to them, that's unacceptable, I just ignore it. I ignored it. I just walked past them and said, 'Come on, let's have a cup of tea.' All I felt like doing was to go over to the poster and rip it up and say to them, 'You immature imbeciles.'" So studies of male-dominated industries link this type of behaviour with fear of rejection, using humour to resist engaging with women on a professional level to ensure that men continue to benefit from their patriarchal dividend. This quote also demonstrates how both how humour can exclude and how humour... Sorry, I just moved. So this quote also demonstrates both how humour can exclude and how humour is part of a broader pattern of sexual harassment. While insulting, women's reactions to such humour provides an opportunity to both resist and refuse habitual patriarchal hangovers, at times through counter-laughter and humour or unlaughter. Women in this study responded to this kind of humour, which personally denies them professional credibility, with emotions that range from indifference to anger. And her refusal to accommodate the intended insult in this quote gave this female firefighter an opportunity to take the moral high ground, and as discussed separately by other participants, to outperform the men in question by, quote, becoming more competent than them. It thereby provided an opportunity to use humour as a site of resistance and refusal. Moving on to humour as refuge, which is the third and last one. So humour as refuge manifests in diverse forms in the interview narratives. Refuge is achieved, for example, by using laughter as stress relief, particularly when laughing together with other women, as it simultaneously creates a sense of solidarity and safety. So this is the case in this quote, where a female ranger reflects on a rare occasion when she was able to work with another woman on the fire line. When interrogating the nature of the laughter on that day, she became aware of her own gendered identity and the self-discipline she uses in an attempt to fit in with a dominant firefighting masculinity that positions femininity as weaker than masculinity. So she's saying, I was embarrassed because we giggled a bit and she made me kind of lose my guard. Then I was trying to regroup and, I didn't want to stand out as being the female or the giggly friends. I was being kind of sarcastic about it. I was going, go away, Kat. She's a lot more relaxed and she's been firefighting for a long time with males, and so I was busy trying to do my stuff. It would put me off having other females there, I think, because it would be different. And I then asked what it would make you more relaxed. Yeah, and let down my guard and not concentrate as much. And yeah, it would be worse for my firefighting abilities, because the whole thing is quite humorous, all these male egos and all this stuff happening. It'd be quite funny, so you tend to laugh. Now, self-surveillance in the form of perceived appropriate behaviour and identity, which clearly aligns with the performance of a firefighting masculinity, was a noticeable trait amongst the female firefighters in this study. The female ranger quoted here portrays giggling as an undesirable, effeminate characteristic, although male firefighters clearly giggle too, as the quote about the sexually demeaning poster demonstrates. Self-surveillance in this sense can be oppressive when it prevents women and men from being open about their thoughts and abilities as equal members on a firefighting crew. And this ability to reflect inward and better relate to others through the process of laughing at oneself reveals how joking about gendered tensions in the workplace can both hide and reveal the truth. Indeed, what often makes a joke more successful are the truth it reveals. And this form of taking refuge in humour was particularly evident when discussing the uneasy tension between the inherent dangers of firefighting in the context of pregnancy and motherhood. So this quote, the ranger says, I have worked with a woman crew leader here, and I felt in a way that it was a bit unfair. She had to do all the chainsawing at this stage. I didn't have a chainsaw ticket because the requirements for chainsaw training came in when I was pregnant, and I didn't want to do the training while I was pregnant. The thought of, giving myself cesarean would have been just a little bit too gross. And the thought of an accident to me, I just thought, I can't bear the paperwork. So cynical types of humour like that displayed here, together with black humour or gallows humour, are well-known coping strategies used by personnel in high-risk occupations, such as the emergency services. It highlights how we often laugh because we're troubled by what we laugh at, because it somehow frightens us. And this type of laughter was common during interviews. So in this quote, the female ranger talks about a kind of a sense of moral responsibility that she has to staying alive now that she has kids. And what the quote reveals is both a heightened sense of responsibility and mortality with motherhood, and how joking enables these women to talk about serious issues which are often considered taboo due to societal judgment female firefighters face in terms of gaining equal rights during pregnancy, maternity leave, and return to work policies. While humour provides refuge by enabling female firefighters to speak about inequitable aspects of their lives, it also shows how laughter can indicate a degree of powerlessness. Humour can cushion the narration of the harsh reality of the ongoing challenges female firefighters face. They speak to uneven vulnerabilities that exist in this line of work. Firefighting is dangerous for all bodies, but there are a host of very embodied concerns that women in particular face as mothers and mothers-to-be that are revealed through the use of humour. So in summary, this study, like my work more broadly, shows how an acute awareness of how affirmative action can challenge gendered assumptions of firefighting is often countered by gendered norms that continue to shape domestic and professional life. For example, strong society-wide gendered norms about parenting still impact the working lives of female firefighters. Different types of humour enable female firefighters to negotiate these challenging situations, and in so doing, it can foster change towards greater equity and equality. Our study shows how laughter and humour are used to express and deflect feelings, to diffuse tension and perceptions of danger, to communicate with and across gendered lines that divide or exclude, to mediate, reinforce or overcome boundaries of gender difference, to resist provocations and harassment, as a means to fit in, build group cohesion and to foster trust and solidarity, to test relationships, as stress relief and to talk about serious issues, for self-surveillance and reflection that increase understanding of others, to take the moral high ground and to indicate a degree of powerlessness. For all of these purposes, the power of humour lies in its flexibility. The ways female firefighters use humour to negotiate adversity troubles gendered workplace norms by unmasking and challenging male privilege and masculine norms built into organisational rationality and management concept without even being named as gender. Humour possesses the unique ability to give voice to the unspoken, to question the taken for granted, and to take the invisible and to make the invisible visible in everyday life. And in doing so, humour can empower women and men alike by challenging the asymmetric power relations that are an inherent part of patriarchal structures. However, as the examples also demonstrate, humour equally has the power to maintain asymmetric power relations via boundary heightening humour when jocular aggression is provided with an exit strategy through joking that masks harassment, exclusive group membership and provokes emotional responses that are often seen as gendered behaviour. What is particularly evident from this study, however, is the way that humour and laughter facilitate stories of personal disclosure. Laughter can abate tears and hurt caused by frustration, fear and painful memories. Humour can disclose the inconsistency and absurdities of social norms and inequities. And in being simultaneously universal and particular, social and antisocial, mysterious and understandable, humour can be both innocuous and detrimental, and empowering and a force for change. And I'll finish just with the reference slides here, which I'm very happy to send you copies of this writing if you contact me. Thank you.